The smell of smoke was the first thing I noticed before the pain set in. The fire licked the walls, swallowing the velvet curtains and spreading across the polished wooden floors. My body felt weak drugged, paralyzed, and every attempt to rise from the ground ended in a pathetic collapse. My vision swam, and through the haze I saw her, Madeline. Her delicate frame stood at the doorway, her lips curved in that sweet, poisonous smile she always wore. She clutched a knife still slick with my blood, as though it were a precious heirloom. Behind her, I saw the faces of my brothers, 5 men, tall and proud, their silhouettes illuminated by firelight. But their eyes were not looking at me. They were locked on her. "Help me!" I choked, my voice hoarse, my hands stretching toward them. My legs refused to move, numb from whatever drug she had slipped into my tea. But instead of saving me, my eldest brother rushed forward, not to me, but to Madeline. He pulled her into his arms as if she were the most precious treasure in the world. "Are you hurt?" he asked her, panic lacing his voice. She tried to kill me," Madeline whispered, her tears perfectly timed, rolling down her cheeks like diamonds. "I only defended myself." And just like that, the knife she had driven into me was forgiven. I gasped, shaking my head violently. "Lies! She's the one!" A sharp kick slammed into my side, and I rolled across the floor, coughing blood. My second brother towered above me, his face twisted with rage. "How dare you raise your hand against her? Haven't you done enough?" Done enough? The flames climbed higher, and the world spun. My blood pooled beneath me, mixing with the growing heat of the fire. My brothers pulled Madeline out, shielding her fragile frame with their own bodies, protecting her as though she were the real daughter of the family. And me? I was left behind. As the ceiling cracked and the fire roared louder, I realized the truth. I was never their sister, not in their eyes. I was a mistake, an inconvenience, an unwanted shadow compared to the jewel they had chosen to love. The fire consumed everything. My last memory was the taste of ash and the echo of their voices calling her name, not mine. Darkness followed. But fate, cruel as it may be, is not without irony. When I opened my eyes again, I was not ash and bones. I was alive, 2 months before that night, and this time I would not play the victim. This time I would watch the flames burn, but they would not consume me. They would consume them. The morning light streamed through the paper curtains, soft and golden, painting the room with warmth. My eyes fluttered open, and for a moment I wondered if the fire had been a dream. But the pain in my chest, the memory of betrayal, and the bitter aftertaste of poison told me otherwise. I sat up, my hands trembling. Everything was too familiar. The arrangement of the furniture, the calendar on the wall, the faint scent of jasmine my stepmother insisted on burning in every corner of the house. I staggered to my feet and approached the mirror. The reflection staring back at me was younger. My skin was smooth, my body unscarred. I touched my face, disbelief flooding me. I was alive, back in time. 2 months. That was all the time I had before the fire. I clenched my fists, a cold smile curving my lips. So be it. If fate had been generous enough to give me another chance, I would not waste it on begging for love that would never come. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. "Jane," a soft saccharine voice called. "Are you awake?" "Madeline." Her voice was as gentle as ever, laced with false kindness that once fooled me. Not anymore. I schooled my expression into neutrality before opening the door. She stood there, radiant in pastel silk, her doe-like eyes filled with carefully crafted innocence. "Mother wants us to have breakfast together," she said sweetly. For a moment, the image of her holding a blood-stained knife overlapped with her current angelic expression. My stomach twisted, but I forced a smile. "Of course," I said softly. As we walked down the corridor, I could feel her eyes on me, studying, analyzing, waiting for a crack in my composure. Not this time. At the breakfast table, my brothers were already seated. 5 of them, each with their own personality, each someone I once looked up to. Now, all I saw were executioners of my past life. The eldest, stern and cold. The second, hot-headed and cruel. The third, silent but sharp-tongued. The fourth, indifferent, his eyes always distant. And the youngest, too easily swayed, his affections shallow and fleeting. They barely acknowledged my presence as I sat down, but when Madeline entered, their faces lit up with warmth. She was the sun in their universe. "How did you sleep, Madeline?" one asked. "Do you need more tea?" another offered. I sipped my porridge slowly, letting the bitterness in my chest harden into steel. This was the family I had once tried desperately to please, the family I had died for. Never again. This time, I would not waste my breath trying to earn their love. This time, I would make them regret ever casting me aside. And so, with my first meal of the day, I silently vowed, the game had begun. The days following my awakening felt surreal. Every interaction, every word exchanged, was like déjà vu. I remembered them all, each insult disguised as concern, each look of disdain, every whispered comparison to Madeline. But this time, I wore my own mask. At breakfast, Madeline laughed at one of my brother's jokes, her voice delicate as a silver bell. I remembered how, in my last life, I would smile along, eager to be part of the family. Now I stayed silent. My silence unsettled them. My eldest brother frowned, glancing at me as though waiting for me to falter, to beg for scraps of their affection. "Jane, why aren't you saying anything? It's rude to sit there like a ghost." A ghost. The irony was not lost on me. I raised my head, meeting his gaze with a calm that startled even myself. "I only speak when I have something worth saying." The table fell silent for a beat. Madeline tilted her head, a small crease forming between her brows. She wasn't used to this version of me. In my past life, I would have stammered an apology, my cheeks flushed with shame. Not anymore. Mother cleared her throat and changed the subject, lavishing attention back onto Madeline. "You'll be accompanying me to the charity banquet, won't you, dear?" "Of course," Madeline said sweetly, but her eyes flickered toward me, sharp and calculating. She wanted to see jealousy, anger, anything that could make her shine brighter by comparison. Instead, I smiled faintly, as though I couldn't care less, and for the first time, I saw her falter. It didn't take long for opportunities to present themselves. Fate, or perhaps irony, was on my side. One afternoon, I overheard my third brother and Madeline whispering in the garden. I hid in the shadows, listening. "She needs to learn her place," Madeline said, her voice dripping with honeyed venom. "She embarrasses the family just by existing." My brother chuckled. "Don't worry, she won't last. She never does." I leaned against the wall, my lips curving into a cold smile. So that's how it was going to be. When I stepped into the garden a moment later, both their faces stiffened. "Brother," I said smoothly. "Madeline, what a lovely afternoon." They exchanged glances, unsure if I had heard them. I tilted my head, feigning innocence. I was just thinking, shouldn't we begin preparing for the upcoming examinations? After all, it would be shameful if any of us failed. The family's reputation is so very fragile, isn't it? My brother stiffened. He hated being reminded of his academic struggles. Madeline bit her lip, sensing the edge in my words. I walked past them, the faintest smirk tugging at my lips. The first seed of unease had been planted. That night, alone in my room, I opened a notebook and began to write. Not just notes, but plans, strategies, weaknesses, every flaw in each of my brothers, every crack in Madeline's mask, every opportunity I could twist to my advantage. This time, I would not wait for them to destroy me. This time, I would strike first. And when the fire came, it would not consume me. It would consume them all. I learned early that revenge isn't fireworks, it's compound interest. It's small things done repeatedly until they add up to inevitability. So I watched. I listened. I recorded details that most people considered mundane: patterns of late-night calls, a brother's predilection for a certain brand of whiskey, the exact phrasing Madeline used when she wanted pity. I kept a little black book, not the poetic kind, just a ledger of leverage. The first coup was quieter than I imagined. My second brother, Tomas, had a habit of leaving his study door slightly ajar at night. He kept financial papers there, loans, a copy of a mortgage application for a property he'd been hyping to the family. He bragged about it everywhere, the kind of scaled-up certainty that made small-town men feel large. One evening, I walked past his room on the pretense of returning a book. The door was open. I slipped inside, heart steady. I didn't need to read everything. I only needed to find a name: the loan officer, the firm, the email address Tomas used for the application. Found, one printout, a tasteful logo, a signature line. 2 days later, there was a discreet inquiry at the company I'd discovered. A polite call from a woman, me, with a voice soft and surprised, asking for clarification about a loan that seemed to have an error. The person at the other end politely checked the file. It was a simple mistake they could not confirm without further documentation. The loan was delayed. Thomas stormed into the sitting room like a man searching for an enemy. "What did you do?" he demanded. I smiled and arranged a cushion behind my spine. "I did nothing. The bank is thorough these days." He seethed. For the first time, I saw the brittle facade crack. Tomas's pride, his love of being the household's golden son, couldn't take uncertainty. It ate at him, fraying his nights. He drank more, snapped at servants, and spent the next week trying to charm his way back into favor with the banker. It was small, but it gave me data. Tomas's vulnerability was reputation. He would panic in public, and that panic would become leverage later. Most families overlook what they deem background. The quiet is a gift. People who speak loudest assume they dictate the record. They don't notice the woman who smiles and moves through the rooms like air. Madeline courted attention by design. She smiled when it suited her and feigned fragility to harvest protection. The family swooned. It was why she could stab me once and be sanctified, but even perfected masks have edges that catch. At the family charity luncheon, a carefully staged event, where Mother's name glittered on the programs, Madeline took center stage. Her dress was whispered about for a week. She floated in measured steps across the stage to present funds with my mother, and the crowd applauded the union of beauty and philanthropy. I sat in the audience, let my eyes travel not to her flawless cheekbones, but to the small things. How her assistant's hands trembled. How her perfume coated the air around the podium, enough to make people associate the scent with her brand. I noticed who really did the work of the organization's silent staff, who filled folders, the treasurer in the back, who always checked accounts. These were the gears, and Madeline was the painted face. I volunteered to help with the follow-up, tying up loose ends, writing thank you letters. My name did not appear on the programs. I was a shadow. But the treasurer, Mr. Ho, noticed my precision. We ended up spending an afternoon reconciling ledgers, and in a week he'd recommended me to a small committee as a reliable assistant. A week after the luncheon, Mother praised Madeline in front of guests. "Our dear Madeline is the face of our mission," she proclaimed. Later that afternoon, a small letter arrived on Mother's desk from a donor who had been double charged. The donor was polite, but the error noted how administrative follow-up had been lax. The board murmured. Mother flashed the look that usually fell across her face when someone made trouble. For once, it was directed away from Madeline and toward the administration. Madeline's smile faltered for a moment. Someone asked a precise, inconvenient question about receipts. She answered with practiced charm, but the seed had been planted. The charity's image had a smear. I had not been loud. I had simply done my job better than anyone expected. When the board called for an apology, Mother's secretary, cautious, embarrassed by the event, mentioned my name in conversation with the treasurer. "We should rely on Jane," she said without a flourish. Madeline watched me that night with a new wariness. She had no idea that the quiet woman she ignored could redirect the flow of the river simply by clearing the rocks. Not every strike had to be clever. Some just needed theatrical timing. The eldest brother, Victor, guarded the family's honor as though it had been carved into the family crest. He prided himself on connections, businessmen, officials, people whose signatures mattered. He also had an embarrassment he guarded, a youthful indiscretion from his university days that could have ended his career if brought to light. I won't claim a moral high ground. Revenge is not purity, but I understood leverage. I found his old friend, an ex-colleague, who had fallen into lesser circles. He remembered the night Victor had slipped beyond decorum. Money mends old tongues. No, it tightens them. I made a discreet donation to his pub and invited him for a quiet drink. The man came with a bottle and a memory. 2 conversations and 1 brusque note of gratitude later, a town reporter published an innocuous nostalgia piece about local leaders' university days. Victor was quoted in it, jovial, unaware of the article's subtle hints. Then, deliberately, the paper included a side note. An old photograph taken in the university garden, unnamed faces, drinking merriment, has been brought to light. Victor's face turned gray that morning. He had not prepared for the past to be coaxed into present light. The photograph circulated among colleagues and then found its way into a private chat where a rumor became a joke. It was nothing like a scandal, but perception can be a blade the size of a whisper. Victor apologized in boardrooms and over charity dinners, fumbling to present seriousness where there had been an unguarded photograph. He chastised me silently that evening. His stare along the table said, "You'll pay for this." I sipped my tea and let the bitterness ground me. He had lost something that morning, the effortless aura of untouchable dignity. You do not stand up to a family like mine without learning to move like a shadow. I thought the world would teach me hardness. Instead, a man called Master taught me strategy. He had once been a patron of my father's, an eccentric scholar with a leather satchel and eyes like black glass. My earlier life had known him as a man who offered rare books and quiet counsel. When I fled after waking in my younger body, I found him in the city, turning through manuscripts in a shop that smelled of dust and lemon. He recognized me without surprise. He had watched the family play their parts for years. "You are reckless," he said the first evening. His voice was neither kind nor cruel. Reckless in a dangerous world means you will die twice, once by their hands, once by your own hurry. He became my tutor. He taught me to observe people as if they were architecture load-bearing walls, ornamental facades, hidden supply shafts. He taught me to use language as leverage, to let silence become its own scream. He taught me to read a ledger, to calculate risk like one counts coins. Most importantly, he taught me patience. "Ruin that which you can replace," he said one night, lighting a cigarette and blowing a ring of smoke through his fingers. "They will notice the void, not the hand that eased the load." Under his tutelage, I learned law's edges and common man's debts. I learned how to purchase the right rumor without being its apparent author. I worked in his bookshop by day and parsed people by night. Little by little, I accrued allies' small cogs in a larger machine. If Madeline had allies in silk, I had silent friends in ink. When I returned home to the family circle, I returned not as the seeking child, but as a ledger that balanced itself. My movements were precise, my words minimal, my patience monumental. The first public sign that something had changed did not come from a sword or a public accusation. It came from an auction. Mother liked to entertain potential donors with a gala and an auction. The family's name in the guest book was sacred. Those who attended were handpicked and expected to compliment the hosting. That year, I offered to catalog the items for the auction an invisible role, but one that placed me inside every invoice. Mr. Geller, a wealthy patron who often displayed generous interest in Mother's charities, planned to donate a vintage pocket watch. In the catalog, the watch's provenance had been inflated, its lineage rewritten to sound rarer and more desirable. Madeline rehearsed the wording in front of Mother the night before, wanting to ensure the applause would be loud. When the auction began, I worked in the back, handing bids to the clerks with a composed face and a ledger that was pristine. At one point, a man raised his paddle and bid. The watch's price climbed. Applause followed. Madeline preened as her smile reflected the flames of the chandelier. But then, at the moment of sale, the clerk pointed to an asterisk in the catalog and quietly announced an amendment. The watch had been misattributed in the catalog, and proper provenance would be provided later. It was a small correction. Technically, nothing immoral had occurred. The buyer frowned. The hush that follows doubt rippled through the room, and Mother's hand tightened. Madeline's expression momentarily broke. Later, a donor sent an email questioning the catalog's accuracy. The auction committee convened. The error required a follow-up bulletin, a note of apology, and a minor refund. What it did, however, was link two things in people's minds: the family's social sheen and the possibility of false perfection. The image shattered just enough that people began whispering about standards. Not a scandal, but a dent. Madeline's morning-after composed smile was brittle. She walked past me in the hall and said nothing. Her assistant fumbled with calligraphy. Back in my room that night, I opened my ledger and circled the day's notes. A win. Not loud, not permanent, but calculated. The river had shifted its course a few inches. Rumors are like splinters. Tiny, almost invisible, but impossible to ignore once lodged under the skin. Victor, the eldest, was the first to bleed openly. His misstep at the university was now whispered at charity dinners. His proud voice no longer silenced rooms. He tried to rebuild, to project dignity, but the doubt in people's eyes corroded him. Tomas was next. His financial strain ballooned into debt. The visionary project he'd championed faltered, delayed by the bank's sudden caution. When the board asked questions, he fumbled with numbers that didn't add up. I didn't even need to push. His pride was the rope he used to hang himself. At home, arguments erupted like thunder. Brothers once united in their disdain for me now snapped at each other. And through it all, Madeline played her role, the gentle, perfect daughter, trying to soothe the storm. But her voice was beginning to crack. For the first time, my parents' gaze shifted, not to me with love, but to her with doubt. Madeline underestimated me. She thought cruelty required spectacle. She thought betrayal must be loud. The way she stabbed me that night, the way she watched me burn. But cruelty, whispered, is more enduring. She began making mistakes, small ones at first, forgetting an important donor's birthday, misspeaking in front of the press. Then larger ones slipping into vanity, pushing too hard for credit, insulting a committee member who did not forgive easily. I watched her mask fray. At a gala, she spilled wine on her dress, and, for a heartbeat, her expression twisted ugly, uncomposed. People saw it. They whispered later, "Perhaps Madeline is not so perfect after all." I only needed to nudge once. An anonymous letter arrived at the charity board, suggesting irregularities in Madeline's expense reports. I had the documents copied carefully, showing dinners billed as meetings, gowns listed as uniforms. The board did not accuse. They asked questions. And questions are worse than accusations, because they plant suspicion that never dies. Mother defended her, but even Mother's voice carried hesitation now. The night of fire, the night they left me to burn, came back in waves as I planned my final strike. I had spent months unraveling them, thread by thread, but I wanted one last moment. One where they would feel, if only for an hour, the helplessness they once gave me. It came on a stormy night. The charity had collapsed under scandal, the board withdrawing support, donors silent. Thomas was broke. Victor was diminished. Madeline's reputation was ashes. I invited them all under pretense of reconciliation, one family dinner. A private hall, fine china, a long table. They came, because even broken people cling to ceremony. I stood at the head of the table. For the first time in years, they looked at me, not as shadow, but as figure. "Do you remember the fire?" I asked softly. Silence fell. Victor shifted. Tomas swallowed. Madeline looked at me as if seeing a ghost. "You carried her out," I said, nodding at Madeline, "and left me inside. My screams were real. The flames were real, and yet you walked away." No one spoke. The thunder outside filled the silence. You wanted me gone, forgotten, replaced, and yet here I stand, while all of you, I let my eyes sweep the table, are already ash. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to break the glass. My presence was enough. Revenge, I learned, is not fire. It is ice. It burns slowly, leaving people to feel the cold long after the blaze is gone. The family unraveled. Victor lost his seat on the board of directors. Tomas declared bankruptcy quietly. Mother retreated into illness, father into silence. Madeline tried to cling to dignity, but her name had become a warning whispered at luncheons. Be careful, don't end up like her. And me? I walked away. I had no desire to inherit their house of rot. I had built my own path with skills sharpened under my master, with allies who respected my mind, not my name. I opened a school of strategy and arts, a place where young women could learn to think like generals instead of waiting to be saved. Sometimes on quiet evenings, I remembered the flames, the crackle, the smoke, the betrayal, the part of me that once begged for love from people who only ever wanted my absence. That Jane is dead, The Jane who lives now does not seek their approval, their pity, or their apologies. I claimed something far better than revenge. I claimed myself,